and like Rocks Off Rip This Joint, though, like that is burned into my memory. It's a core memory, and just all the way through. Like this album is great. It's great to play it on vinyl, super loud.
Yes,
it just sets you up for a good weekend.
It's true. It's true. It's one of the best albums to listen to on vinyl. No question about it.
Welcome to the B-Sides and Beers podcast.
Welcome to B-Sides and Beers, episode 87. Tonight we're digging into the Rolling Stones' 1972 double album, Exile on Main Street. Woo! How's it going, guys?
Woohoo!
Yeah. That was an epic intro there. It was like boxing intro.
I'm getting good, man. I'm getting it. I'm getting it down,
it's
man.
Time.
86 episodes of me doing this shit, and it's starting to get.
Oh yeah,
shows.
yeah, for
the shows.
Practice.
Man, that's crazy. We already passed the 1 year anniversary, of course, or the 3 year anniversary.
Happy 3
years. Sorry,
Happy
not 3.
3
Almost
years.
Another year went by.
Almost.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Right? We thought this was just going to be a way to blow off COVID. Here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah. Still got topics, still got things to talk about, which is good.
Yeah.
What are you guys drinking? Who wants to go first tonight?
T. I nominate you.
Oh, me?
Oh, go.
Mike, go ahead. Do it.
Me. I'll do it.
Do it.
I am back. Well, continuing with my Caribou Lagers. Caribou is from Pacific Northwest Brewing Co. out of Prince George, BC.
A lager.
It's a delicious lager.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels good on the pocketbook.
Always.
So,
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
So that's where we're at right now.
Nice. And hey, you got to get your Lucic jersey back.
Oh yeah, he's coming.
He's back with Boston. I see your jersey in the back there, so I'm like, yeah. One more spin around the sun.
One more. Let's do it.
Yeah. Dane, what do you got?
I've got a Guardian IPA from Strange Fellows. So
I like that can case. Is that it's a dragon?
It's a dragon.
Yeah, sweet.
Yeah. I've had this on the podcast a couple times, and right now criteria is price $3.50 and below. I don't even look at anything above.
Yeah.
So.
Unfortunately, it's just nuts.
Yeah.
Is there lots that's south of $3.50? Have you found that there's lots or not too much?
No, man. I look for the little sale signs.
Yep.
I look below the knees.
Yep.
And if I get super desperate, then I look at the front by the till.
Yeah.
Like the quick one grabs. Usually they got something cheap
little
there.
coolers in the front there.
Yeah. And like, you want to try some of this stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
Is it under $3.50? Then
drunk.
yes.
Yeah.
And I'm sold. Yes. Well, not for lack of trying, this is my first dry podcast because
Oh man.
I went out to get food and I was like, the BC liquor store is right there. Forgot to. So I came back, made it all the way back. I'm like, it's all good. I got time. So I walk all the way back to the truck, which is a 15-minute walk. Get there and realize I brought the wrong set of keys. The key does not have the one to the park gate. So
Oh man.
I went in to the Students Union building. I tried to find like the craziest drink I could find. So this is what I found. It's a gabunami, which is like ice cream over like Kool-Aid or something. I don't know what this is, but it's a gabunami.
Is there like chunks of coconut floating?
I don't know, man. This is the
Get ready.
The safest one I could find that wasn't like milk based. Everything was just like milk this and strawberry milk and mango this, and I'm like, no, I'm gonna just do this. So here goes nothing. If I grow a third eye, you know why.
All right. Is it a party in your mouth?
It kind of tastes like cream soda melon, like watermelon cream soda. That's what it tastes like.
Sounds delightful.
Yeah, it's
All
good
right.
for a couple pulls, but it's the best I could do. So, cheers,
That would
boys.
round off.
Cheers. Cheers nonetheless. Cheers
I was going to
nonetheless.
say that wouldn't round off my kind of week, but
Yeah, no, I know. I was, like I said, I tried. It was just like I was getting blocked. There was a reason why, and there's no booze on campus. So,
Oh man.
what, allowed or just
well,
sold?
like for sale, and I'm thinking back. I'm like, I guess there wasn't really a liquor store on U of A campus either.
No, just bars.
Just bars, and you can go there, but I can't bring anything back. So,
right.
yeah.
Can't do like live from the
No, well, I guess I
Yeah, there you
could
go.
just outside.
UBC
Whatever
pit.
Yeah,
or whatever it's called.
that's exactly what it's called. That's their big nightclub down there.
Oh, awesome.
The pit. Yeah. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this whole thing, but anyways. Oh, let's talk about this album.
Yes, that's.
I mean, we've all kind of talked about this album for, since maybe the beginning of the podcast, and all of our
Yeah.
kind of shared loves of this album. And, I think it was just a good time to come around and do it. And, I mean, I heard lots of stuff beforehand before I kind of dived into any research. I've always heard kind of the wives' tales of what went on in this recording session and
Yeah.
everything that went down, right? And it was just kind of cool to connect all the dots and put it all together.
Yep.
But I mean, first things first. I mean, for me, this has got to be like one of the most eclectic Rolling Stones albums out of the ones that I've listened to, right? Like it's got pretty
Yep.
much everything on there, from blues to soul to country to rock, and old rock too, right? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I-
like proper rock and roll.
yeah. And I just, in a time too when like punk is on the rise and it's kind of breathing down their neck, and there's other bands that are trying to change their sound to match that. The Rolling Stones are not doing that at this time, and they are going even kind of backwards, even a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
To some of that stuff. So, anyways, just to kind of set the scene on this one, it's just an album we've kind of wanted to do for a long time. So, here it is. So, I mean, obviously this starts too with the fact that they are in like super tax hell in
Tax exile.
yeah, in
Crazy,
Britain,
man.
right? Which is like close to what I've read, like 90%, like owed 90% in taxes. So
Yeah.
it feels like that some days here,
So,
Yeah.
But and then I don't understand though. I could not figure out how they like just evaded these taxes. Like they just went to the south of France and then like nobody tracked them down.
I think it was more of a situation where the government just wanted to get them out of the country. So this is how we force you out, and
Yeah, it's crazy.
I think
what
it
it
goes.
fe-
It
that's what
boils
it
down
seemed
to a
like.
jurisdiction thing, because they definitely
Yep.
want their money, but if you're in
Yep.
another country, they can't necessarily grab you. But the second they step foot back in,
yeah.
they could be arrested and whatever for tax
Well, I think-
evasion is what they're doing.
I think a big part of it was that they couldn't earn enough to pay it back if they stayed in the country. So they had to leave, do the album, do the big
Yeah.
tour to get X amount of money to pay back the back taxes and all the money that was basically stolen from their last manager, who said, I own these songs and I own these songs and you need to pay me this before you this and that. So
Yeah. We talked about this before, and I think essentially the music industry was based upon a handshake and a wink, and that's how it was done. And I'm sure the shadiest of shady people flocked to this.
Oh yeah,
And like you name it, all Pink Floyd,
yeah.
Meatloaf, all these like greats were just completely in debt, and you're like, how is that possible?
yeah.
Yeah, shady dealings. That's all that is, right? Like it's.
That's
just-
right.
Yeah. I think you're exactly right.
And a lot of it's
because-
just managers stealing their money. So
Yeah.
all under the radar.
yeah, nothing.
And meanwhile,
nothing digital.
they're on drugs.
exactly
right?
Yeah.
like massive drugs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, they said that Keith spent most of his money on heroin. Like the majority of it was just gone to that. And,
yeah.
Yep.
Like unbelievable. But I mean, the place that they rented to do this mansion.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That Keith had with his girlfriend at the time, sounded like an absolute dump. Like
Totally.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, the basement, they said, was just like, there was so hot in the basement, and they were like shirtless and like shoeless for most of it, and
they had to separate in different rooms to do it.
Yeah, they said the producer had to go from room to room to talk to them, each of them. Like, he couldn't just come on the mic and say something to them. Like,
yeah, because he's out in the truck.
Yeah,
right.
He's got his
studio.
Talk. Yeah, he's got his little talk back deal. Well, you talk about like the inside of this villa mansion. Years back, when did this thing come out? I bought a DVD. It must have been 2011, maybe 2010, 2011. So it's Stones in Exile.
Oh yeah,
it's a DVD. So this it shows. It's all video and interviews and, in their own words.
Wow.
Kind of thing. It's cool. Like all the behind the scenes, them recording stuff and them, in the basement and them outside and them, sitting around the table with their parties. And it's all here.
Keith Richards napping.
He's just napping or cruising around in his speedboat and
oh my God.
Whatever. Yeah. So
yeah, I can't believe that guy's still alive. Like, it's unbelievable.
Right?
19 lives.
Yeah,
going back to that mansion, when I was younger, I always pictured the mansion that the Chili Peppers rented out.
Oh yeah,
for Blood Sugar, Sex, and Magic. Like, it looked so cool, and I figured, well, because this is in France, this must be even cooler.
Yeah.
Right.
But when I was researching it for this project, the second I read hot, humid basement, there's nothing good about that.
Yeah.
And then it was an old, like, Nazi fortress.
Yeah, it was
nothing good about that either.
Yeah.
South of France, yeah.
Yeah. And, like, why stay? You know what I mean? Like, why do you keep doing it? I mean, go somewhere else in France.
They couldn't find anywhere else. They checked out a bunch of different studios, and there was nothing good enough, and price-wise, too. I mean, it's to rent a studio at any point in time when it costs you, $1 million an hour for some of these places.
Right.
It's, and for the most part, nothing suitable. So they just kind of did their own thing. Let's get our truck down here. Let's hook that up. Let's set up. And because it was all written there too, or most of it, except for 3 songs.
Yeah.
It was done from 69 to 72 when it was released. But, they started recording it in London and then continued and then in France and then finished everything up in LA.
So the album is genius. Mm-hmm. I wonder if they knew they had it in the pocket in France. Or was this just like, holy shit, let's just do something and we'll figure it out in LA? And that's when they realized they had something on their hands. But even then, the initial reviews were shit, right? So,
yeah. Well, the initial reviews were shit just because, when you're coming off of what was the one before that. So we've got
Sticky Fingers, man. They're hot at this time. Like, they got Sticky Fingers,
yeah,
right. And then they
let it bleed and Sticky Fingers comes out.
Like these are totally like bangers. Like, one right after another.
But you've got that, and then it goes to, okay, now we're going to put out a double album, but we have almost no material coming into this villa to do this, like a handful of songs. The majority of the time they're not even writing at the same time. Sometimes they'll be set up as a jam and then they record and take bits and pieces, but sometimes you've got Keith that's high on heroin and he's off, waiting. So now everybody's standing around waiting for him to play and to do anything. And it's just, nobody's in the same place at the same time.
Yeah,
so.
Which is wild. What do you think about that too? How anything even gets done? It's like a Guns N' Roses situation. It's just like,
totally.
I don't even know when Axl's coming. Maybe next week. I don't even know. you know. But and you're high on smack
they
all
still
the time.
manage,
it's just,
and you're high on smack all the time.
But I guess you're there,
and
right? Like you're at the house, you're living there, right? So
yeah, well, I think they were there for like 6 months or something, just writing or attempting to get started to write, and then parties, and then attempting to start again, and then parties, and then So
Dane was so surprised there he booted out. He had the surprise face
left.
on, and then he was done. So I don't know where he is. We were talking about when you left, Dane, about Keith being high on smack the entire time, them not being in the studio, like all of them together at the same time, like pretty much ever. Them recording in the basement, them recording outside. Like we just kind of talked about how it was amazing that even anything got done. It was like a Guns N' Roses kind of style recording session. It felt like
disjointed, run and gun.
Right.
Yeah. So that's kind of where we left off. But I mean, the fact too that I think that they had all these different musicians coming in and visiting too was also part of this, like, the process of getting all these different sounds together, right? Like obviously like Graham Parsons coming in is going to bring the country twang to it, and I mean, he's on the album too, singing backup. So just so many different people popping in and out, Yoko and John and James Caan and you name it, right? So they said, here's one hot fact for you on the hot facts on the Yoko and John. John was so disgusted by all the excess that he yacked right there in the basement. Yeah, really? And then left. Probably left. I thought that was kind of funny. Like,
that's it.
Yeah, I can't imagine what it smelled like down there.
A hell of a lot better before you did that.
Totally.
Thanks, jerk.
Number 8.
Yeah. Well, it's just amazing the sound quality that they got out of those recordings too. It's listening to it, even thinking about what they did for in Los Angeles for just the overdubs and the finishing touches to it. Just what they brought to that space, it sounds amazing.
Yeah,
like it sounds it sounds natural but polished and very. It's a rough recording, but it's not a rough recording. Like, it's super pro. So.
Yeah, and that recording studio still is in Calgary.
I think so. I'm pretty sure that's the same truck. Yeah,
I've seen it in I don't know what it's called, the museum of like
I went there.
Instruments or something like that.
In Calgary.
Yeah, in Calgary. It's amazing. It's a really good. I mean, if you got a couple hours to burn, I highly recommend.
Don't they have Tonto in there too? The big synthesizer, don't they? Yeah, that's the Stevie Wonder synth.
Yeah. We had talked about this before, about a year ago, with because I said that they had Stompin' Tom's board and they had his stomping board, and they had a Neil Peart kit in there, and they had. Just everything. They had a Corey Hart wing to it at the time. It was just like a one-off,
but not a Bryan Adams.
Not wing. A Bryan Adams one, but they had the sunglasses. And, where my son? Yeah,
at night, baby. I mean, and that thing did other things too, right? Like it did like Bob Marley live.
Yep.
Yeah. It did a bunch of others too before it got kind of retired. I mean, somebody should just resurrect that and bring it back to life and use it.
It's in the museum, and you can. The only way you can see it and see inside of it is if you book on a certain day when they're having, like a walkthrough and a show and tell kind of a situation. I mean, I was only able to see it through the window, just peeking through the glass, but couldn't see inside. Yeah.
And he's frozen again. He's got a death stare on you right now.
Oh man, what did I do? What did I say? I take it back.
He was amazed
I'm
before,
sorry.
And now he's angry.
He's gonna jump through the screen and choke me.
Oh, now he's back. You know, there's another Dana Canham coming in. I don't. What's this? Who's this guy?
Who's this one? Let him in.
Oh, there he is. Did you see that? That was crazy.
Whoa!
You like transported. All
okay.
Right.
Sorry. I'm sorry, guys. This is like the epic album to talk about.
It's a 2-banger. It's a 2-sider. That's it. 2 LPs.
Yeah.
Tonight. Yeah. I heard too that they stole electricity because they didn't want to pay the money, so they stole from the French railway to save some some francs, so they could power the studio and power the amps.
Yeah.
Like, who finagled that?
Yeah.
Keith just strung out, just hook off the wires, mate.
Yeah. Who was the electrician that that touched the wrong wire that one time?
Right? Like,
totally different. Again, totally different from what I initially thought. They were just in France living an extravagant lifestyle.
Yeah. Which they kind of should have been, it feels like, right? Like, based on the success of the last few albums that they had, like, they should have been rolling in it, but when you got to pay 90%, not so much. So, you know, like, but obviously they followed it up with quite a few other solid albums after that too, so that was okay. And then Exile kind of caught on, right? And then everybody's realized that this is a genius album, and you know, now it's one of the greatest of all time. But you know, even when you talk to they talked to Mick, and he said he doesn't like it, like he's not a big fan of it, and he's
so weird.
Yeah, like it's always those ones where you're like, oh, I love this album, and then you hear the artist talk about it, and they're like, this is my least favorite album out of all the ones I've done. And you're like,
or I don't remember recording this.
Like,
it's too high on smack or whatever.
What gives?
Maybe it's one of those things where it's so requested, and they've played so much of it live.
They're done.
That it's one of those, that's just not interesting.
There's no way fans want this album more than Jumpin' Jack Flash at a concert.
Yeah, it's and going like to the horns too. They got horns in there, like all down the line. There's horns in there, and you know, even there's horns kind of in Sticky Fingers too, on Bitch and stuff like that. Right? There's lots of horns, but I love the '70s Stones. Like
oh my God,
everything about it. And all the albums that they made through the '70s, I love. They're just so good, right? And I mean, kudos to them for continuing to go, right? I mean, they managed to stay relevant in the '80s when Bob Dylan couldn't, you know. And it's like, you know, they figured it out even in the 2000s, right? They were hanging out with the Dust Brothers. They were trying to be cutting edge, right? They've kind of stayed on top of it, you know, which is
50 some odd years later, they're still going.
Yeah.
For the most part, right? Couple deaths along the way, but for the most part.
Yeah. I mean, albeit still, I would say leveraging that 70s brand.
Yeah,
right?
Totally.
Like when you think of the Stones, you think of strung out Keith Richards. You think of
Mick wearing eyeliner.
Oh man, that guitar solo in Shine a Light.
Oh
you know? Just the golden era of the Stones.
Yeah. And you know what? Bill Wyman is not like given enough credit. I know it says he only played on 8 out of 18 tracks, but they said that he only played on those tracks because he wanted to avoid the toxic atmosphere of the villa. So, you know, you can imagine. And then, they didn't say anything about Charlie, so he must have been cool with it all. He just was probably right in there too. But but I mean, Mick was married. He was like, he just had a kid too, right? So I think he was like, felt like he had to settle down a bit.
Yeah, well, she was still in she was in Paris, so he spent most of his time there during the recording because she was pregnant. Yeah. So he was there with her, and then flies back or drives back or whatever to do some recording, and then So it's not like they all sat down and wrote together. So,
which is again, how the hell did they get anything?
Mind blowing that they had this double album that sounds so damn good and structured so well with, you know, those that setup. It's nuts.
Yeah. A couple other things too. There's just a couple hitters that I found here. Like the dealers came in, they took guitars as payment.
Yeah.
Can you imagine what they're
Yeah,
worth now?
Exactly. And then Keith was banned from France for 2 years. After that, they 2 years couldn't go back. So I mean, I guess they couldn't tour there, right? That's one downfall. But just the fact of all that kind of put together, the fact that the weather is, affecting the sound in the studio and making guitars go out of tune and drums go out of tune, and it's just, and such a 1972. I can't imagine what they have for technology there to record on the go, like on the road.
Tape.
Just tape, right? So
multi-track tape.
Yeah. And I mean, they talk about that too. I don't know if that's in that DVD, but about them doing the reissue too of it in 2010, I think it was 2011, something
2010.
like that.
Yeah. That's when I initially, because I did not have it previous to that, but that was the year that I bought the deluxe whatever set, and then I ended up buying this thing because I loved it so much. So
it's a great album. I don't know if it's my favorite Stones album though. Mm-hmm. Is it your favorite Stones album?
It's as a front to back album, like as a collection of songs, yes. I mean, there's a lot of songs from other albums that I like more, but from a front to back, I can't think of another Stones album that's better. There's not one song on this that I skip.
Yeah.
Like not one. Yeah. And every time I listen to it, it's stellar. Like it sounds amazing.
Yeah.
So
for me, it's by virtue of circumstance that it was the album that I purchased at like a flea market for, I don't know, it was probably €10 or something like that.
Yep.
And I would put it on every Friday. Like that was the start of my weekend.
Mm-hmm. Rocks off, baby.
It was just, oh yeah, exactly. Yep. Spark up a J or whatever it was, cook up some supper, and like rocks off, rip this joint.
Yep.
Though like that is burned into my memory. It's a core memory, and just all the way through. Like this album is great. It's great to play it on vinyl super loud.
Yes.
It just sets you up for a good weekend.
It's true. It's true. It's one of the best albums to listen to on vinyl. No question about it. Yeah. It just sounds good every time you put it on there. I mean, and on Spotify and stuff too, right? Like it sounds good. You can hear it in there, but it sounds better on vinyl. It just, that album for sure does.
Yeah. Well, it's nice that there's not all the hits, the radio hits that we've heard a billion times before, over and over again at the exact same time. Like that's another reason why this album is so perfect, where none of these songs are played out for me.
No, right? And what did they release
true.
off of this album? Like Tumbling Dice, Shine a Light,
Sweet Virginia,
Shine a Light,
Happy,
Tumbling Dice. Yeah.
Is that it?
That's about it. Like those are the big ones. Rocks Off was pretty big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rip This Joint, I think I read that they released it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, Tumbling Dice is the most streams here, so I mean that's really, but it's this is one of those albums where I don't know. I've always kind of thought of it as the Rolling Stones, like their university thesis on music, where they've taken all their influences from start till now of their early rock and roll and blues and country and soul, and they packaged it all together. And this is, we sure a lot of, we're white dudes from England that, ripped off all these, American, black artists that everyone's has done it before. And, they're a rip off of the blues and country and soul, but they proved that they could take all these influences that they love and put it all together and package it into this. And here you go. Here's for my final grade. Now I've got my fucking PhD in rock and roll. Really?
Yeah. No, a good way to put it. Totally. Yeah.
Well said.
That's exactly it. It's and not very many bands can do that and take all those influences put together. It usually sounds like smash. So, that's it's true. It's true, and that's just the sign of a good band.
Totally.
Yeah.
Is there anything? Did you guys find anything in your research about why it was so influenced on Americana? Like they were sort of, I guess, the big sort of British influence was kind of peaked already. And
well, I mean, they were touring.
Was
they were like going into the States, right? Like, so and like lots of touring in the States in the 70s for them. So like they were, I think, just trying to make a name because they were finally kind of out of the like British invasion kind of scene, and it was into something completely different now, right? So I think they were just trying to like get some more traction almost, right, at that time in the States. And I mean, they were all over States. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's even at some point, it seems like Mick Jagger's singing with like an American Southern accent.
Big time on a lot of it, yeah.
And I mean, which lends to, the song sounding awesome.
Yep.
But yeah, I always wondered, like, why was there such a huge Americana influence?
And even the album cover,
it
too,
makes
right?
sense.
The album cover, I think the pictures that it's taken from, I think it's called The Americans, if I'm not mistaken. And it's all just like circus freak show, like performers, right? Like, but it's just a picture of a picture.
Lot of it too,
a picture of a bunch of pictures.
A lot of it too is pictures of the guys in the band in very, just candid pictures, and they don't even know they're getting shot, and there it is, and they clip it and put it into this collage. So,
kind of like the album, like it's just that collection of that, right?
Yeah,
like
totally,
yeah,
all mashed together that way. But it's up there for me for my favorite albums, for Stones albums for sure. But like it's front to back. I don't have to skip anything, and maybe that's the kicker, is that you don't have to skip anything, right? Because even on my favorite, what I think is my favorite Stones album, I still have to skip songs.
Yep.
Right, because I've heard them too many times. So maybe when I put this back on, it was just nice to let it play. And I even played Tumbling Dice because I'm like, I like that song. I just like that song, and I like the construction of that song too. Like if you listen to it, it's like the verses get shorter and the chorus gets longer.
Right.
As the song goes on, it goes from like something like 12 to 6 to 2 on the verses, and then it's like 2 to 6 to 12 on the other side for the chorus.
Right.
So I read that was on the advice of the cleaning lady.
Oh, did you?
I think so. I might have this wrong, but I remember reading something about her name was like Virginia Dice or something.
And she was tumbling.
She was tumbling dice. Yeah. Well, but it was on her, like she suggested that, and they ran with it.
I think it had something to do with, there were so many songs in here based on gambling as well. And apparently she was a big gambler, and that's where they got a lot of the stories from.
Okay.
From what I understand. And a lot of the lyric writing, they were talking how Mick was saying how he didn't have lyrics for most of the songs. So basically they sat down and wrote phrases on pieces of paper,
right,
and just pieced them together on the floor. So they got this stack of papers that are like just thin pieces of paper. Each one has a line on it, and it's just piece it together to make that flow. So
we should have taken that advice, back in the day, because it feels like that would have been way easier than being like you sit down like, baby, I love you. What's the next lyric? I don't know.
Yeah.
One shot, two shots,
two shots.
3 shots.
Yeah.
Just joking. Love you, Trev.
It's classic. Classic TNT. Yeah, no, great idea.
But
to
it's
do that with the lyrics.
Totally. And this whole album is sort of unconventional, from songwriting to production to, I guess, how people received it. And it's easy to think like, oh, this was just sort of like a fluke. Like, the Stones are the Stones. And of course, like they fluked out. But I think they were just really on to something. And this might have been kind of, I don't know, almost like a pivot or a transcendence or something different happened here that they weren't really able to define. But it worked, right? Like all recording in different rooms. Everything was kind of a fucking mess.
Yep.
But it wound up being one of the greatest double
too, right? We've talked about that too, about bands putting out double albums, right? And how usually it's
how hard is it? Yeah. I'll have to admit, I listen to the Use Your Illusions podcast when I drive back from Vancouver because it's just so dang funny. It's such a funny episode. And we're talking about how, they were already on tour and the album wasn't finished. So there's a couple songs that they just took live off the floor and just chucked in there. You can tell. It's very obvious, but you don't see or you don't hear that here, rather. Like
there's no filler.
It's, all of it seems like it was done with intent and not like by chance.
Yep.
Yeah. And I mean, again, it's always like a little weird too about the Glimmer Twins, Jagger Richards kind of thing. You're not quite sure like who does the writing and like who kind of, it's always like a little shifty business there too, right? So, even with like kind of Lennon and McCartney, it's always like, well, who really wrote this song, and it's all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Because, George wrote most of the songs.
Yeah. And I mean, like Happy, they said that Keith basically did that thing himself. Like, he showed up high on Smack and did all instruments and like had a couple other people help him out, but and obviously Mick sang on it, but it's all him. But I'd almost like to do an episode on Goat's Head Soup not next, but at some point, because it'd be interesting to see how they change things to record. I mean, I know they recorded it in Jamaica on that album, so like a little different than the south of France, right? Like I'm sure they got a nice lots of bands record there. In Kingston, it was like in Kingston, Jamaica, and it was like
there was definitely a scene.
Yeah, right. So I think that was probably a little more easygoing, but still probably as much Smack as before.
Yep. Yeah.
My God, I've had Goat's Head Soup.
Have
before.
you?
And it's delicious.
It's interesting. They do all sorts of stuff. Well, where I was, this was in Namibia. They cut off the goat head. They do the soup thing, but then they also take out stuff like the brain. You'll have that along with, I forget. But anyway, everything was delicious except for the brain. I just couldn't do it.
Too salty.
It was so greasy.
Took it out and like put it in your bowl,
like as a side dish, and there was like cheek and all of that stuff. Yeah, it was intense.
Don't waste it.
Nope.
When in Rome.
When in Rome. Anyway, I digress. But can you imagine? I mean, all of these like places throughout the world where they just recorded and like talk about being a global band. Way back in the day, when travel was, really expensive and where, networking was difficult and all of these things, and they're just making the world their work area. Like it's crazy to think.
It is, and you know what I think too. You were talking about a big Led Zeppelin poster behind you, but I think of Zeppelin in the '70s too. right? Like
Yep.
they're trudging through the Americas too at the same time, and they're like as big, if not bigger, than the Stones during this time, right? Like just massive. So they're trying to kind of step along all these bands too, and not just Led Zeppelin, right? Like there's a whole bunch of other bands that are doing quite well then too, right? So, it's the Stones though. It's again, it just shows you it's a good band, right? You know that it's when you have a good band, that they have longevity. I think it shows that they can do that.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that every good band that doesn't last forever. It sucks, but you know what I mean? It just goes to show.
Yeah.
So what is your favorite Stones
Goat's Head
album?
Soup, man. That's my favorite Stones album. Yeah.
Oh, that is.
Goat's Head Soup. Yeah. But again, I get to some of those tracks on there, and I'm like, I can't do like Angie and like ones like that, but
because just great songs. You just heard it so much, man.
Yeah. I mean, it's just
Great
they're good.
songs.
They're good tunes, but like it just, I love that album too. That's kind of. It was the first Stones album that I had bought like on vinyl when I kind of started collecting vinyl. So I listened to it a lot. Yeah. But I mean, all of these albums, like I said, all these kind of 70s albums, like, after that, it's only rock and roll, like Black and Blue. I like even the Love You Live, like the Andy Warhol cover, like all of those ones are just, they're good. They're just all
Yeah.
And
I have a hard time between Let It Bleed and Exile. They're two different albums, but depending on your mood, but man, it's a toss up for me.
Yeah. Like, that's still like 60s Stones though too, right? Like that's still got that that British kind of thing to it, right?
Yeah.
But no, I hear you on that. It starts really getting good at Exile. and then there's just a whole bunch kind of after that, right? There's even some stuff in the 80s, man, I don't mind. That they
there's
did.
a lot of great stuff, man. And with Let It Bleed, it's very much like it's definitely a goodbye to the 60s, like the hippie thing, the all the stuff that that they thought would be world changing, and it didn't work. So goodbye 60s, let's do something else. The Vietnam War and all this other stuff that didn't work out, and LSD wasn't the answer. And
screw peace and love.
Yep. Let's move on to the 60s.
Yeah, move out of there. Get out of there. Yeah, no, good. I'm glad we did this one because obviously we needed to do it.
Yeah, thank you.
No worries. It was time to bring her back up again and do it. But neat to kind of put it all together again. It's one of those ones that I had lots of preconceived notions, and a lot of them are wrong. What else is new?
We learn things every episode.
Yeah, totally.
Can I just throw this in there?
Yes.
Their first album was called The Rolling Stones / England's Newest Hit Makers.
Yep.
In 1960.
You gotta love those old albums.
Yep.
Here come the Stones.
The Stones. And it was them and the Beatles, and it was the back and forth of cover tunes and who does the best cover tune of this, and then
exactly. They came a long way.
Yeah. They kind of always had that bad boy image though, and they kind of went through that the whole time, right? They kind of just rode that. A little bit of a tough guy. Mick Jagger's got that tough guy image too, so it worked.
Yeah. Have you guys ever given their Satanic Majesty's Request?
I've given it many spins.
You have?
That's another one that we should even just have a brief talk about on another episode. But it's
the only reason why I listened to it is because Keith Richards said it was the biggest piece of shit they ever put out.
It's very possible. I mean, you're coming out at roughly the same time as Sgt. Pepper's, so now we got to put out our Sgt. Pepper's, and it's not quite the same thing.
I mean, LSD sounds completely different than heroin.
Yep. Stay off the smack, kids.
Yeah, it produces better music, I think.
Yeah.
Well, that's another thing, because with Exile on Main Street, you've got an album that was recorded by heroin junkies and mixed by cocaine freaks. I mean, how did that even work? How did that even work? I mean, you've got like completely two different paths and mindsets. I don't know how that jived, but it did.
Along with every other band in the 70s, probably too, right? Just like high on something, you know?
Yeah.
All right, we want you guys to subscribe, share, and review this podcast. Keep it going, keep it strong, because we're having a great time entertaining you guys with B-Sides and Beers podcast.